There is a book called The Authoritarian Personality, and it describes an authoritarian personality arriving at the syllogism familiarity breeds contempt. This describes the authoritarian personality of Yoko Ono, who I call Gweener because she's so despicable that her name is abhorrent to me. She had a film called The Fly, and it had a Asian woman who was asleep, and the fly was buzzing around her armpit and over her breasts, between her legs and under her kneecap. And with familiarity with the human race and the fact that many people in the human race are erotic art appreciators. Japan has a lot of erotic art appreciators. Familiarity with them has bred her contempt. And the Zionist Wattenmaker who worked with Yoko Ono on the project of the Geffen Corporation that Barack Obama represented as Johnny Cochran for Reagan's government, the Zionist Wattenmaker, who was an Attica State Prison psychiatrist, also felt the same contempt, and he exhibited for me the Venus fly trap that the Zionist warmongers conceptualized with Yoko Ono as the symbol of the AIDS attack that they authored. And in fact, when I tried to get help from Peter Gabriel's attorney from Amnesty International, she said, "Thanks for cutting," when I sent her a clipping, which was meant was in close personal talking with Wattenmaker. She had somebody named Kate Parkhouse write to me. The first person who Gabriel contacted me with was Kate Parkhouse. Well, there was a Parkhouse shelter across the street from the Wattenmakers. So Gabriel was in on Gail Burston all along, as Yoko Ono was. Wattenmaker had said to me, "Thanks for cutting my telephone wires." What had happened was that Carmen Colucci was showing me how to splice telephone wires. We spent a lot of time cutting telephone wires. Well, he showed me how to splice telephone wires and how telephone could be used to wiretap. And Wattenmaker had told me he was going to put me under hypnosis. So they had led me to cut the telephone wire using hypnosis. He was a powerful Attica State prison psychiatrist. And Gabriel knew that they had done this to me. Now, how did they warp my imagination so much is something that the city of Pittsburgh never allows explored. The Pittman gang, which is like Quarryman and Pitman and Hitman and Pitbull, were ferocious criminals who would surround me and batter me with slaughtering blows to the head. Now, what Colucci and I were doing were just pranks. We were showing, at least that's how it seemed with Colucci. We just a prank to cut telephone wire and then splice the wires and put the speaker back on and listen to it like to demonstrate a wiretap. So, in fact, Wattenmaker told me a story of a phone that got wrapped around a woman's neck and she suffocated. It was ruled an accident. His mother had an automobile that had lips set to the ignition set to on or off, And Kasparowski used to tell me to look for the lips if you're going to steal a car. Wanamaker was obsessed with women's virginity, and when he examined women, he would look for the lips because he would spread the story. He would identify the women who had lost their virginity. And this was all about trafficking of women. The car show they said they were going to take me to, Russell Biggs was a black man who knew all the cars. He knew what all the cars were. And there was one Japanese woman named Shiono, which is like vengeance of Shi and Ono, and Wattenmaker, vengeance of the Zionists and the Japanese working together against the Eisenhower-Truman administration, the Truman Show. And I was from the Eisenhower group. My father was. So Wattenmaker is like, Frankenstein generators, Van de Graaff generators, and nuclear bombs, Wattenmaker. And he developed a nerve agent that they gave to me. And they forced me to ingest. And Gail Burston wrote ingest with a J-E-S-T. Love, ingest. And she was a Zionist from Israel. So you get the mindset. Well, Obama, so Johnny Cochran, of course, has worked with Gabriel saying, well, Jimmy was stealing cars and cutting telephone wires. And it really doesn't matter to him that it didn't work that way. I wasn't stealing cars. The one occasion when I was involved in showing a couple of adults how their friends, VW, could be hotwired, they had me severely inebriated after severe beatings. Now, in Allegheny County, taking somebody hostage, torturing them, and using them for sex is called a provincial norm by the NAACP. The only thing they want is to make me look like I was as criminal as the people who were torturing me. That's the only thing they want. They don't want anything to do with looking for who was responsible, what sort of industry it was, what sort of secret crimes were taking place, who organized it, what Attica State Prison psychiatrist was doing in charge of it. They don't want any of that. They want Jimmy to say that he was not tortured. Well, I was tortured. The Pittmans damaged my mind. They didn't incriminate me. That's not what happened. They used inhalants. Here's the sadism of Peter Gabriel and Robert Fripp is that they went digging for the stories that traumatized me the most, that I'd least like to tell, and threatened me, and murdered people. They murdered Shannon Harps. They raped Deaf Jeannie, my deaf advocate. They gave me Parkinson's. They poisoned me in the food, demanding that I tell them these stories. And if I don't, they change what happened. They don't tell. They forced me. I'll explain one of the days of my life at that time. Okay, what they're avoiding is the brain of a child can be tampered with so traumatically that the child doesn't know what they're doing anymore. They I was a picky eater. My mother called me that because I didn't like carbonated beverages. Coke was too strong for me. Pizza was too strong for me. They wanted to know if I wanted pizza for my 9th or 10th birthday. I said no, I don't like pizza, it's too strong. And well, here's what happened. Tom Albert of Burma called me and said, come down the hill and meet with me. And we had tickets. We were going to go see Deep Purple. And we had gone to see Deep Purple. And the Pittmans were there. Why did you lead me into this? And he said, because they threatened to kill me if I didn't. So they kidnapped me onto a bus, and we went out to Penn Hills, and they stole a can of Quick Easy. Took me back to Kings Estate, drenched a rag in paint thinner, put it in a paper bag, and forced me to breathe the paint thinner for hours from a soaked rag. And Boomer said, I can't because my brother was bleeding from the nose and mouth. They said, you don't have to, but he, pointing at me, you have to. And they were threatening to kill me if I did. And Ralph Karsh came and lit a fire and had me come out so he could accuse me of stealing Will Wattmaker's marijuana. Colucci had stolen Will Wattmaker's marijuana. Now, when we gave it back, Ralph Karsh lit a fire to accuse me of doing it. And that's how I escaped the Pittmans. So they had a severe LSD trauma. They put me in a garage and forced me to use inhalants from a paper bag while on a severe hallucinogen of LSD that was given to me by Eben Platt. And they claim that I wanted to do this. That's not true. It had nothing to do with what I wanted to do. The whole place was surrounded. The way that I'm surrounded in Tacoma, the dogs come out when I try to go out walking. If Obama has an interrogation question he wants to put on me. Now, who were these people? Were the Mancines, Neva Mancine. Neva was organized child trafficking. So one of the things we know, there was a hole peep in the Clem shack where somebody came and peeped through the hole, like the film in the Holocaust cover. If you look up the films of the Holocaust, you'll see that. So they were gassing people in a place called King's Estate for Neva Pornographic, which uses a C and a Star of David as their symbol. And Neva Mancine, which is like Manson Cinema, snuff films, is the name of this union industry. And they were scientifically clever. They got the police department and the Jews to think through how can we make it so that the victims are guilty. They're violating. The FBI will say, you crossed the line. The NAACP will say, you crossed the line. How can we get it so that the victims are devil worshippers? Well, they did it by having a girl, Nikki DeBarno, who debauched when she was 12 years old, who was fully developed, who lured me into his shack when I had just turned 13. So they play this game of 13-12. Jay Inslee puts these big 12s all over Seattle, big 12. So that it symbolizes that the devil worshippers were the ones who got gassed. And it's the Neva Pornographic. They use the symbol for assassinating JFK. So you have Britain and the fascists saying that the people who are being victimized by AIDS are the devil worshippers. That Jimmy Curry, who was kidnapped and gassed and tortured, was forced to breathe inhalants. A child who was, you could see pictures of me. I was in the scholars program and they tagged me from behind. It was like being shot. And that Seattle starts poisoning me in the mouth. They made pornographic films. It was a genocide of pornography. You think TikTok is bad. You should see what the Pittsburgh NAACP did. It's worse than the TikTok pornography of genocide being made by the murderers in Gaza. The murderers who attacked Gaza started with the supernova rave because remember that the victims of this Venus flytrap are devil worshippers. The supernova ravers are devil worshippers. And Israel was behind that. That's why you have names like Gail Burston and Sinwar. Because Sinwar and Gail Baum were working together. They now come out of the closet. The sandbaggers are such a laugh. They say, oh, well, there are gangs in Palestine being encouraged by Israel. One of them was this Hamas show that came into the supernova ray. And the sandbaggers can't get that to penetrate because they went along with Yoko Ono's Venus flytrap. The NAACP were worse than even the TikTok genocide. They made pornographic genocide. They were using, they had a girl with needle tracks and a tattoo of the Grim Reaper pointing at her vagina on Mount Desert Island, in a place called the Maxwell House. They were making these ultimatum peep shows. Zell was talking about a scheme to transform the human race by injecting the blood. Now, if you turn back the clock a little bit, the reason why nobody ever was allowed to get the message is because Sean Lennon was saying it's all about my father, it's all about John Lennon, it's all about. They were making black market monies of this Venus flytrap for Yoko Ono and saying, "Oh, woe is me." They had a C and a Star of David, and they Ripper murdered Shannon Harps. Let's turn back the clock a minute just to get the idea of what they didn't do. What they didn't do was they didn't get the mayor of Chicago, Mayor Daley or something, to stand up before the Democratic National Convention in 1968 and say, Bobby Kennedy and his brother were executed by the Dallas Police Department for fornicating with Marilyn Monroe. And the people don't get back to the Christian standard of one time getting married at the tree of life and making love only to their spouse and staying in holy wedlock for the rest of their lives. We're going to commit mass murder with a germicidal warfare weapon, and we're going to forge Jimmy Carrey's name on it and say Reagan didn't know. That's what they didn't do. They didn't go into schools and tell children, you have to stop playing spin the bottle with Jenny Rubin. Don't play spin the bottle with Jenny Rubin. Because when your lips connect with each other, you're invoking the force of creation. A child will gestate in the womb, and you will end up for life indemnified to Clint Eastwood's cyber stalking system with Elon Musk. That's what they didn't do. What they did was they attacked me blindside. Colucci would come over and show me how to splice my phone and make a wiretap. Nothing to do on a Saturday afternoon, so we sit in my room and have an experiment with my phone. And it was his idea. And it was obvious why they were doing this. They were cultivating what they called a persona. Greg Carl said, the queer ball is going to perform for us. And said that at Ellen Buncher's house. Paul Buncher has a name tag downtown for all this stuff or something. I forget what it is. But they came in to the schools with armed maniacs. And when I cried, biting my fingernails bloody, I wasn't crying my fingernails bloody because I was afraid I'd be found out for hotwiring a phone. Learning how to hotwire a phone. That was just a Saturday afternoon experiment in my room with an extra telephone. I was biting my fingernails bloody because there was an armed gang who was forcing me to take nitroglycerin, jumping out of the hedges, threatening to kill me, attacking me brutally blindside. And I pleaded with the office to help me. And they disappeared. They didn't even look for me. They didn't report it. So what Pittsburgh can't accept is that there's something. It wasn't even corrupt in morals. It was kidnapping and torture of a child. Complicity in kidnapping and torture of a child. Why is that? Because they were making pornographic genocide films of me and selling them to Yoko Ono. You see how simple it is to understand what the police department really did in the AIDS attack? It's really very simple to understand what the police department really did in the AIDS attack. They covered for pornographic genocide. That's what they did. That's completely what they did. They're doing it to this present day. The police department was behind the AIDS attack with Hollywood people like Ronald Reagan and Clint Eastwood. It's perfectly clear from the evidence. They refused to let the evidence be seen in a court of law. They're playing a game of running out the clock. They had me afflicted with Parkinson's, and now I'm dying. I'm in decline. And they're just running out the clock. Why don't you get together with some people and write some poetry? That's their idea of dealing with learned hands with an enormity. And this is what the NAACP did. They played a game of pussy ball. Two versions of pussy ball. That's what Obama was doing. It was to promote Yoko Ono and Midori Goto. And they want Adrian Belew, Robert Fripp, Peter Gabriel, Mick Jagger, these people all want everybody to cheer the script. Yoko Ono says it's a pretty script. It was too pretty to throw away. They wanted people to cheer the script, to cheer. They go clap, clap for the assassins of John Kennedy. Because the Carousel Club proved that he was a hanky-pank Irish who would sleep with the pretty girls on the weekends and undiplomatic at times. And so clap for him. Clap for the Zionists who released the AIDS virus. Clap, clap. And clap for the murderers trapping children under rubble. They put out the food. Familiarity breeds contempt. They put out the food at the Venus flytrap, and the hungry people come and they start shooting them. Shoot the hungry people. It's not a living dead. This is what the Israelis do. They make somebody suspicious because there was all this indoctrination. That's what you don't see in their explanation, but there was all this indoctrination of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, pursuit of happiness. And the children were all sleeping around. It wasn't just me. None of the girls, one of the things that they say all these girls were victims, they all had lovers before they used me. All of them did. You can rattle off all the names that Clint Eastwood has in Amanda Harcourt's Rolodex. They all had lovers before they seduced me, every last one of them. That was the whole point of dating. Greg Carlson nibbled. The initial encounter of the ex-motive is tainted by the shadow of the adversary. This is the whole mindset of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's the whole thing that they have done. It's the absolute truth about them.